A great pleasure to introduce another keynote speaker. His name is Gabor Ambrus. Gabor Ambrus is a research fellow currently in the Faculty of Social Sciences here at the Angelicum in Rome. He completed his PhD, his doctoral degree in systematic theology at Catholic University in Leuven in 2014. And from his doctoral studies onwards, he has dedicated a number of years of research to media studies and the philosophy of technology. He is also a research fellow at Charles University in Prague in the Theology and Contemporary Culture Research Group. Professor Ambrus, his primary research interest is theological / philosophical interpretation of the human condition as defined by contemporary technology science. He is author of the monograph titled From the Golem to Freedom, a study on technology and religion, published last year in 2024 by Bloomsbury. So he will speak today on AI and contemporary culture, asking and answering the question whether we can read the sign of times and how to read the sign of times in the time of AI and technological advancement. So please join me and welcome Professor Gabor Ambrus.
Thank you, Professor Tabacek, for your kind introduction. I would like to welcome you to this talk, whose title is, as Professor Tabacek introduced it, and as you can see, AI and contemporary culture, can we read the signs of the times? You might look at this title with interest, but you have also every reason to think that this title might be problematic. First, this title might be problematic at a time when culture means culture wars, and we are in deep disagreement over the fundamental values of our culture. Culture and contemporary culture in particular, in these times, sound like an unfortunate starting point indeed to discuss the common good, which is the subject of our conference. Second, this title might be problematic. As the signs of the times, this concept has been controversial since its conception in the words of Christ in the Gospel, referring to signs which are mostly met with blindness rather than understanding. The biblical controversy over signs between Christ and the Pharisees immediately follows Christ's miracle of the loaves, feeding 4,000 people. I will tell you more about that in my talk's conclusion. Anyway, one thing is certain. Such a title prompts us to approach the subject of this conference, AI and the common good, not only through the problem of culture, but also theologically. I ask in particular whether a theological approach to contemporary culture, or more precisely, a theological approach to AI in contemporary culture, or to the new dynamics around AI in contemporary culture, can reveal us something about the contribution of AI to the common good. To put it more simply, I ask whether theology can show in its own unique way how AI can contribute to the common good. Let me add that there is a good reason to ask this question. Amid all the fearful confusion we witness today over AI, And amid the possibility that AI is on course to harm rather than serve society, there is reason for hope that the discipline of theology, among all other scholarly disciplines, can show us a way in which AI can contribute to the common good as such, the common good taken in its most pregnant sense. There is reason for such a hope, as it has happened in the domain of religion and in the Christian faith in particular, that the reality of community, communion, and what is common has taken on the fullest meaning of these terms. My talk consists of 3 parts. In part 1, I will aim to understand the common good properly in the context of AI. Part 2 shall delve into the question of AI and the common good, considering the case of social media. While the focus of part 3 will be the possible contribution of theology to the subject discussed in part 2, AI, common good, social media. So understanding the common good properly, part 1. To show theology's unique way to contribute to the question of AI and the common good, we need, first of all, to sideline a less pregnant sense of the common good. We need to sideline ways in which AI contributes to the common good in this less pregnant sense. Among those who follow today's public discourse, I think there are many who would assume that AI can significantly contribute to the common good at a deep personal level, even at a spiritual level. And this is a development which has repercussions for theology. A few weeks ago, one of the leading British newspapers, The Guardian, published an article on people forming relationships with AI chatbots, which today have more than 100 million users. The article states emphatically that men who have virtual wives and neurodiverse people using chatbots to help them navigate relationships are among the growing range of ways in which artificial intelligence is transforming human connection and intimacy. This survey, conducted by the newspaper, highlighted that people use chatbots to help them manage different aspects of their lives, from improving their mental and physical health to advice about existing romantic relationships and even experimenting with erotic role-playing. They can spend between several hours a week to a couple of hours a day interacting with these apps. Clearly, AI is moving in a direction in which people become emotionally more and more attached to it, and AI taking on a role in their most private personal lives. And what can be intimate and deeply personal is never far from the spiritual and even theological. The topic of AI and religion was the subject in one of the issues of the Zygon Journal last year, with the slightly preposterous title, Religious Robots. In this journal issue, one of the articles bore the title, Spiritual Conversation with a Companion Machine. The article gives full consideration to the plausibility and already existing practice that AI can function as one's spiritual companion or even spiritual guide or confessor. Although the authors take a quite balanced stance on the subject, insisting that there is a significant difference between, on the one hand, human beings as spiritual companions, and on the other, AI chatbots on the same role. They claim nevertheless, the authors claim nevertheless, we think that there is considerable potential for automated assistance with the spiritual life, and we expect to see growing acceptance of that. And the authors cite evidence that this growing acceptance, referring to literature, according to which AI and robots could take over some of the functions of clergy or pastors. Now, let me refrain from any theological evaluation of this idea. The idea of AI as spiritual companion or even spiritual guide. If this idea is problematic, it is, from my talk's perspective, problematic for another reason. Namely, it is problematic from the perspective of the common good. For AI, as an intimate personal companion, even as a spiritual companion, even if it keeps company for the whole human population, even if it caters for all human beings one by one, we fail to promote the common good in a pregnant sense. One might even venture to say that what such an AI will promote is nothing but a pseudo-common good. Why is it so? It is so because such an AI is inconsistent with the common good in a pregnant sense and can even do damage to it, as the common good is simply not what is good for the sum total of all individuals. If such an AI happens to have, as far as it does, the individual quest of every person, it still does not have these people as a community. If AI is to make a positive contribution to the common good in a pregnant sense, it is to make contribution to the communal life of its users. The following passage is from a book by Thomist philosopher Yves Simon, claiming that in order that a good be common, does not suffice that it should concern in some way or other several persons. It is necessary that it be of such nature as to cause among those who pursue it, and insofar as they pursue it, a common life of desire and action. By contrast, what we see today as the default architecture of AI reflects the default architecture of politics, in which human communities and even humankind itself are primarily a sum total of individuals. And it follows from this state of affairs, and here let me present my own summary of the question. When it comes to the common good in a pregnant sense, the idea of AI as a personal or spiritual companion is just a small part of a much larger problem. And all the benefits we usually list up as the actual or potential blessings of AI do not promote the common good as such and do not have the potential to promote it by a single inch. It still remains to be seen how AI can contribute to our communal life and to our love and respect for one another, which every one of us so greatly desires, and how AI can help in stopping the devastating loneliness pandemic which currently plagues our societies. Indeed, healthcare AI will keep me perfectly healthy, and my personal AI assistant will give me spiritual advice, and I will enjoy all the individual benefits of AI, but I still don't know how my debilitating loneliness will end and how I will find love and community with people. Okay, now let's take a look at the question of AI and the common good, part 2 of my talk. So this is the case with the basic architecture of AI in our society, one might ask, what about social media and the extensive use of AI on social media? Can't we take what is best in social media and what is best in AI on social media and use it as a model that points towards the common good as such, towards the common good taken in a pregnant sense? Whatever the ills, shortcomings, and very bad mistakes of social media may be, does its basic principle, after all, not coincide with Facebook's or Meta's mission statement about, quote, building the future of human connection and the technology that makes it possible, end quote? Are social media not coextensive for so many of their users, for even the bulk of their users, with contemporary culture itself? Do social media not form almost a social and cultural totality for many of our contemporaries? And if social media thrives on data and AI is the quintessential data machine we have, could a modified and ameliorated social media not thrive on AI? Couldn't AI thereby contribute to users' communal life and to the common good as such? To take these suggestions with any seriousness, we need to face the aforementioned ills and shortcomings and very bad mistakes of social media. That is, the dark side of social media, which is pretty dark indeed. Social media are supposed to connect us and are claims to build the future of human connection, but at the same time, it turns out to be what a media scholar has called the disinformation machine, and what can rightly be called the disconnection machine. The basic meaning of this disconnection and disinformation on social media must be more or less familiar to you. Owing to the way in which social media algorithms work, maximizing user engagement to generate more revenue for their companies, these algorithms prioritize those kinds of media content that spark strong emotions in users, irrespective of the content's truth value. Most powerful among these emotions are fear and outrage. Yet these emotions, by making sure to keep the users on the platform, create and maintain an online tribal culture, as fear about something and outrage over something have a double effect. On the one hand, group cohesion within one's own group, and on the other, hostility against others outside the group. Cohesion within one's own group, those people who share one's fear and outrage, and hostility against those things and those people at which and at whom the group's fear and outrage are directed. Let me emphasize once again, there can be such division, such tribalism, and raging tribal emotions over media content, no matter how true or how untrue the content itself is. The latter having perhaps no foundation in reality. Social media algorithms in their current form do not care about truth. On the whole, on social media, this is the dark nexus of disinformation, connection, and disconnection. This picture shows social media as working diametrically against the common good of society. And there are indicators of AI only exacerbating this state of things. If social media is basically a disconnection machine, and AI on social media is even more so, and exponentially so, if trained that way by social media companies, prioritizing their short-term business interests. And here arises a perfectly justified question whether AI and social media are necessarily moved in this direction. Can't we possibly envision a kind of AI on social media that is for the common good and genuine communal life of society? As we are well advised to avoid the common mistake of theorizing about AI without theorizing about data and information, it appears that the question about the nature of AI on social media and about its ambiguity boils down to the ambiguity of the nature of data and information itself. This ambiguity about data and information, which is, again, a major ambiguity about AI, has been discussed in an exemplary way and reduced to its basics in a recent book by Israeli public intellectual Yuval Noah Harari, entitled Nexus, A Brief History of Information Networks from the Stone Age to AI. In this book, the author labels as naive our widely held belief that information necessarily leads to truth. And the more information we have, the more likely it is that truth will emerge. This picture is seriously incomplete. It happens very often that the primary function of information and the circulation of information, and we can add here that the primary function of data and the circulation of data on our computer networks is what Harari calls order, by which he means social order, but for our purposes, let us call it social cohesion. As we have seen by the example of social media tribalism, data and information and their circulation maintain social cohesion, and they do so not just regardless of their truth value, but as Harari points out, also and often because of their fictitious character. It has often been the case in the course of history that the strongest social cohesion and indeed social praise was created by entirely fictitious information or downright lies, like in the instance of early modern witch hunts or in the case of Nazi Germany. If so, such a thing like social cohesion by untruth, that is, by information which is entirely untrue, such social cohesion can only come about as a result of the ambiguous nature of information itself, precisely because information retains its affinity to truth and truthfulness. If you like, we can apply here a formula like, it is information's affinity to truth that enables a social cohesion by untruth. And as a matter of fact, such social cohesion is at the same time the fullest in cohesion, exactly as we witness on social media. The price of the social cohesion of one's own group and one's own tribe, the price of such social cohesion by an information bubble is social incohesion, which can intensify to the degree of hostility and hate. If social media, AI, and the circulation of data and information are capable of something that is this dark, social cohesion at the price of hostility and hate, so contrary to the common good, how much good are they capable of contributing to the common good in its most pregnant sense? If untruth and disinformation by AI and social media can have such adverse effects, how noble and magnificent can the effects of genuine information and the truth be by the same means? What is, however, the truth, and what is true? Is it not all relative, with each group and each tribe deciding about it for itself for the sake of its own social cohesion? It is certainly the case today that there are many signs indicative of the crisis of truth and the steady increase in the circulation of data and information entails political turmoil, social order and disorder, strong cohesion within groups, and alarming incohesion in society. Indeed, it entails these things rather than the emergence of truth. AI itself, being a data machine, thriving on data and on its analysis of data, can rightly be labeled a mere epistemic machine with pure epistemic performance in the sense that it retains the aspect of pure performance from preceding technologies. But it does so by producing something new. AI manufactures, generative AI manufactures, and as it were churns out informational items, mental objects, knowledge entities. In a word, it churns out epistemic products without being committed to truth and truthfulness. Shall we despair over this sorry state of AI and data and information and give up on truth and truthfulness? Quite the contrary. What we see and witness today can truly be interpreted as an intensification of the question of truth. It is in association with this intensification that we see the signs of the times, culture wars, and the excesses of group loyalty and hostility multiplying. There is an intensification of the question of truth, since AI and data and information, as I have already indicated before, do not cease to imply, exactly because of their epistemic nature geared towards knowledge, a certain affinity towards truth and truthfulness. The signs of this affinity abound in contemporary culture. You must have heard that Elon Musk, in one of his interviews, declared that I am going to start something which you call Truth GPT, or a maximum truth-seeking AI that tries to understand the nature of the universe. So you can witness Elon Musk thinking big again. And also Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom, in his bestseller book Superintelligence, has identified as a major function of a looming superintelligent AI that it will operate as an oracle of truth, a prophecy which is already in accord with the contemporary trends and uses of AI. I'm sorry, I'm just lost. Yes. So while there is a peculiar obscenity in the way figures like Elon Musk and Bostrom associate AI with truth, I think there is no question about AI and its particular way of revealing things being, from now onwards, part of the truth and part of the way we see truth. As I said, there are abounding signs. You may have noticed that in contemporary culture, in films and books, there are plenty of instances cropping up in which pattern recognition, that is, recognition of data patterns, is presented as a cognitive way to truth according to AI's own way of operating. So this image is from the 2001 film Beautiful Mind. I'm sure you have seen this movie, with the protagonist John Nash, played by Russell Crowe, who is shown a multitude of numbers intercepted from Soviet communication channels, and he manages to single out a string of number patterns which he identifies as geographical coordinates of attacks planned by the Soviets on American soil. And I might add, this film reflects the contemporary sensibilities of the 21st century instead of reflecting the sensibilities of the 1950s. So it's more a 21st century movie than a 1950s movie, although the movie is set in the 1950s. Moreover, in the wake of AI, in the wake of the datafication of our culture, there is a new social and cultural sense of hiddenness, a new sense of things moving in the dark. Let's put it this way, moving in the dark, which could not have come about without AI and big data being a kind of black box and creating something like a black box society. So there is a book of the same title by Frank Pasquale, a very interesting read, and which discusses this problem, the black box nature of our financial and computer algorithms. So let me move at this point to the next part of my talk, part 3, the final part of my talk. And let me ask, when it comes to social media content on which AI draws, and which AI now so abundantly generates, and indeed, when it comes to the duality of truth and social cohesion in this context, the Christian tradition has a particular image to offer as an idea for orienting ourselves. And this image is absolutely central. We can say it is at the heart of the church. Now, I am aware that to bring this up in the context of my talk is somewhat daring, as its relevance is not easy to show and to see. But nevertheless, let's give it a try. According to tradition, the night before his suffering, the Lord made a gesture so powerful in its simplicity. At the festive table with his disciples, he takes bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them. And later, he takes the cup, and when he has given thanks, he gives it to them. This gesture is to say, he nourishes them. That is to say, he gives himself to them so that they be one in him. There is so much to be said, and so much that has been said about this simple gesture in its simplicity and in its richness. Let me just briefly highlight a few basics that are relevant to our discussion today. On the one hand, we see truth in the Lord's simple gesture. It can be considered as a kind of information content or media content. And it has an act of revealing. So much so that everything that was to come, his crucifixion, his death, and his resurrection, are to be seen under the sign of this revealing, this truth, this festive table, this bread, this cup, this nourishment. On the other hand, we see the communion of the saints emerging at its very inception. We see community and communal life and oneness in the Lord. We see an idea of the common good in its most pregnant sense and its supreme realization. We see everything that the technical term social cohesion would ever wish to describe. And thirdly, there is a remarkable thing coming to the fore here. As what we have seen as truth and what we have seen as social cohesion do not make up a separate duality here, but they form the strongest bond. What we have seen as truth, as revealing, as knowledge, and if you like, as information content or media content, in this gesture, has as its full meaning exactly this communion, this community, this communal life, and if you like, this social cohesion as an idea of the common good in its most pregnant sense. I think it is crucial for us today to see clearly this constellation or bond between truth and community at the Lord's Supper. What we have here is not what happens as a rule on today's AI-empowered social media, not this or that content. not this or that content or so-called truth to spark hostility against something and against others. And not just this or that content to create simply social cohesion. Rather, what we have here is content and the truth of this content, which is exactly about community and communal life, or if you like, social cohesion. And the urgency and relevance of the understanding of this bond, of this unity between truth and community, in this primal image of the Christian tradition, this urgency and relevance we can also surely count among the signs of the times. And to conclude my paper, let me say just that all in all, if we want a kind of social media and a kind of AI on social media that can serve as a model for our quest for an AI helping the common good, our primary model and source of understanding should be none other than the Lord's simple gesture at his Last Supper. And we should not give up the hope that this primary model can, in the long run, translate into specific ways of engineering AI on social media. Although what theology can say about that at this point is rather limited. What the theology of the Lord's Supper can nevertheless suggest about this new sort of AI has to do with principles. On the one hand, we need all kinds of truthful social media content whose truthfulness means their particular promotion of social cohesion. And on the other hand, we need these kinds of content to have potential for universal inclusion rather than any degree of exclusion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambrus. We now have 10 minutes for Sister Catherine Droste, who is a professor of moral theology here at the Angelicum. She served as the Vice Dean and then Dean of the Faculty of Theology. She's a moral theologian. She works and is interested in virtues and the moral life and ecclesiology of religious life and the theology of St. Catherine of Siena. So she will provide a 10 minutes long response to Dr. Ambrus's paper, and then we hopefully will have still some time to open the conversation to all of us here. So please join me in welcoming Sister Catherine.
First, I would consider the point you raised regarding the distinction between true common good, which considers the good of the whole of society without negating the good of the individual, versus the pseudo-common good, which many attribute to AI. The latter, the pseudo-common good, emphasizes communal life and millions of individual members of society who have not only entered into dialogue with and seek assistance from AI chatbots, but who have also formed intimate relationships, spiritual, psychological, medical, marital, etc. with a chat GPT psychologist or a possible future AI clone. The human being is created in imago Dei, in the image and likeness of God. AI is created in imago Communitas, in the image and likeness of man. Our creation in imago Dei mirrors the Trinitarian communion of Father, Son, and Spirit. We are created as social beings, but our social nature does not imply relation with any being, but with our neighbor, a human being who is also created in imago Dei. As the document guide says, reminds us, God did not create man for life in isolation. And I would say something of the AI is isolating people, as Professor noted. Rather, God created us for the formation of social unity, and no human being will ever fully find himself except through a sincere gift of himself. Like Professor Ambrus, I would not deny the opportunities AI offers in various forms and systems to human beings. But regardless of how much data it offers, or even how well we can perfect it as to responding to human emotions, imitating various forms of emotion and empathy, no matter how much an individual human receives from AI, such relationship will always fall short. A human being will never be able to offer to AI, nor to receive from AI the sincere gift necessary for a human being's fulfillment and ultimate happiness. Professor Ambrus also raised epistemological questions, which apply to theology. Whether more data necessarily improves the common good, whether AI is, as we noted, the quintessential data machine or the quintessential disconnection machine, and whether AI has brought about a crisis of truth or an intensification, as we noted, of the question of truth. We know that AI can calculate, analyze, multiply, organize, and reproduce data faster than the human mind, including information about God, about me, about psychology, even about recent confession. About is the determining word here. But, as the professor asked, does more data mean more truth? As raised this morning was the question, what about AI self-perfecting itself? Well, what does this self-perfection mean? As we deal with the positive and negative implications of AI, are we prepared to answer Heine's question? What is truth? The human being, regardless of how intelligent, how educated, or how simple, has the capacity to enter into communion with the truth, the Word made flesh. This is not true of AI. No amount of information can change the nature of AI from imago Communitas to imago Dei. That is not based on information. As theologians read the signs of the times and enter the dialogue with science and technology on AI and common good, we must acknowledge AI's limitations. Yes, we can create very powerful and destroy people, etc., but it still has limitations, many of which are rooted in its creator, as has already been noted, the human being. As to these limitations, many hope that eventually AI will learn, whatever learning means as well, and serve We are in a critical moment of dialogue between faith and science, faith and reason, which also brings me back to John Paul II. He said last year. John Paul II on this document, decades before the appearance of AI, but perhaps contemporary times call us to reread the document, which contains unchangeable truths on the relationship between faith and science and create common good knowledge. Principles that can help us in this dialogue of AI and common good. Here I note only two, and I conclude with these 3 points. First, Fides Ratio 43. John Paul II spoke of the light of reason and the light of faith that come from God. And the principle we all know, there can be no contradiction between faith and science, between faith and AI properly understood. And that faith need not fear reason, that with faith we need not fear AI on a certain level, because we have hope in God and we have that relationship with God. Even if AI is powerful and destroyed, which we've always been able to say to do that in different ways. The second point of conclusion, John Paul II spoke of a contemporary, and I would say when we apply contemporary to our day 2025, fragmentation of knowledge and crisis of meaning. Crisis of meaning here specifically as to anthropology and understanding of human person. Human beings were not created solely for knowledge as data, but for wisdom. The spirit of wisdom, who alone can set us free from our fragility and limitations. AI can't do that in the same way. Why? Because the Holy Spirit in wisdom sets us free in a way that opens us up to the mysteries of divine realities and to the relationship with the Father, Son, and the Spirit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Catherine. So a few words from Professor Ambrus, and then we'll open this to the public.
Thanks so much, Professor Droste. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your reflections and contribution to the discussion we are having today. I think you raised several points that are relevant, worth of discussion relevant to my talk. I've taken a few notes, and let me just highlight 2 things and make 2 remarks about your response. You mentioned that in the last section of your response that the encyclical Fides Ratio and its relevance for a discussion today, and the discussion of this section today, the theological approach to artificial intelligence. And I guess indeed it's basically about dialogue, Fides Ratio between faith and reason, faith and science. And of course, concepts like reason and science will always remain relevant to AI because this is a techno-scientific artifact, a human artifact that works in a narrow sense according to techno-scientific principles. So science and reason are relevant concepts. But I might want to draw your attention to the fact that it is also a social entity. So it's a question that the degree of the relevance of this encyclica, so how large this degree is. Because, AI has a lot of social impact, social implications, social effects, and there is a big question we have to do about the social implications and social implementation. And I guess what we really need to do now, apart from a dialogue between faith and reason and faith and science, a dialogue between faith and the social sciences, and a dialogue between faith and the humanities. Because the social sciences and the humanities have a lot to say about the largest problem, about the largest context which we face now when we implement AI and face the problems of AI. The second point has to do, second point I want to raise, has to do with this concept of imago hominis, AI as imago hominis, human beings as imagines hominis, images of, AI as imago hominis and human beings as imagines Dei. So this scheme that the same way as we consider, according to the biblical concept and biblical revelation, human beings as images of God, we can consider AI as image of human beings. I think if there is a huge value in this concept, and it has to do with the fact that AI, after all, is a human artifact and human creation. But as, for instance, Professor Gabor demonstrated, there is a huge operational gap between the way the human mind works, the way we live, we experience things and senses, and the way in which AI senses and operates and affects things. So I think the general gist of the general tenor of emphasizing the different limitations of AI, limitations of human beings, and this gap between them is much closer to the truth than this, I think, this concept of imago hominis. So I don't think it's very fortunate to follow this line, reflecting on the concept of imago Dei and creating a new concept of imago hominis. But I think it remains relevant if we say, okay, this is an artifact by human hands, a human-made artifact, a creation, like the creation of God himself. So this is what I wanted to make as a remark. Yes. Yes.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. I think at this point we have a very limited time space, so depending on the length of questions and answers, we may have space for 2 questions and 2 answers. So try to be brief. Father Thomas first here.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your talk. It's hard to develop me in the sense that a lot of technology and developments in technology center around, in a certain sense, alleviating pain and causing pleasure.
Pleasure, alleviating pain and
Alleviating pain
and causing pleasure.
Avoiding suffering. And for instance, in my Dr. Steve Francis talks about, in a certain sense, we go so far as to not know how to suffer sometimes. We live in a world that the temperature of the room is always exactly what we want. And so, whereas in history, we it's interesting to point out the fact that AI, particularly in the social media context, actually specifically gears towards issues of fear and frustration.
Yes.
That it actually almost pushes suffering and an aspect that drives the negative aspect of our passion.
Yes.
Rather than the positive aspect. There's a danger of comforting ourselves too much with technology, but there's also a parallel danger of, in a certain sense, driving our negative passions.
Yes.
And that adds a character to the conversation.
Thank you for your question. It's really interesting, isn't it? This duality that technology gives us comfort most of the time, positive emotions, and social media sometimes or many times thrives on fear and outrage. And the thing is, social media algorithms figured out what generates more user engagement. Of course, there are lovely puppy and cat videos that are nice and very cute, and that also attracts people. But somehow these algorithms figured out the fact that this tribe of fears and outrage about some political content or some kind of event that is, which level of truth or foundation in truth is quite questionable, but still it somehow it glues users to the screen when they read content that makes them fear about something or have outrage over something. It's a very interesting thing, but at the same time, the cute content is there on social media. There is even an article, it appeared in The Guardian a few weeks ago, AI sloth, AI sentimentality or AI emotions, and stating or claiming that now AI doesn't just run these platforms, but generates content for these platforms that are on the one hand highly efficient and on the other hand very cheap. So this AI slope or AI sentimentality is very much there at the same time. But somehow, this is what media scholars say. There's an Indian media scholar, Ike Kawatan, that's his name, about the disconnection machine. He wrote an article a book about Facebook, and he emphasizes this kind of algorithmic prioritization of fear and outrage and these negative emotions that are the most powerful in engaging users in their online activity and the use of the social platforms. Okay.
I believe we have to stop here, right? Or one more question. One more question. Do I see a hand here?
Thank you very much for your help. So one point that I want to bring up is I think it's very important that we make a distinction between the way in which information might be true from the way that like theological facts are true in the Veritas type of sense. Because there is like a created world, and then information is like empirical observations of that created world, where we then need to take to our understanding before it becomes Veritas level truth that's useful in the same way. You can have like many observations of the world that are each in themselves true in like a scientific sense. They would come to logically using scientific method. But that doesn't mean, and I think that's kind of where we talk about social media comes in. Even if you take out like fake news or things like that, different people can see different parts of empirical truth and come to different correct conclusions, but they still get social conclusion in a different way that's just not the case with theological truth. So I don't know what different words to use, but I think there's an important distinction.
Yes. May I add something? Thank you, Alexis. Thank you so much for your remark about the question of truth, and there are several means and approaches to the truth, and several levels in which truth is relevant. Of course, there is this, you know very well, this Thomas understanding of truth, the correspondence theory between the intellectus and the race. And it can mean very simple things, very factual things, that very simple things can be true that are not very relevant, but we consider it as true. But you know, in my talk, what I drew inspiration from basically was the understanding of Martin Heidegger, German philosopher, 20th century German philosopher of truth. And in his understanding, when he talks about truth, truth is always a very fundamental, very deeply existential truth. And I think this kind of truth doesn't really conform to this correspondence theory of truth. It's more about the emergence of truth. You know that something is about the deepest layers of our being, the most important things about our existence. Something is hidden. And this truth can emerge all of a sudden, can come from hiddenness to emergence, from concealment to unconcealment. This is the German Urverborgenheit, you know, the Randbergen, you know, this disclosure of truth. And I think this is the way I try to present the Lord's Supper, showing this image and trying to elaborate theologically on the truth of the Lord's Supper. That this kind of truth we face here to the Lord's Supper, I think is one of those kinds of truth, or if not that kind of truth, that is most fundamental and existentially deepest truth. That, you know, the stakes are very high. The stakes are the highest. You know, when you ask me whether, you know, I have a correct understanding that the capital of France is Paris, I have this proposition, and whether it is true or not, you know, it is a not very deep existential truth. But I try to show this kind of higher level, deeper understanding of truth, and using Heidegger's concept in a hidden way, because I do refer to him during my talk. You know, I didn't think that it was necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. So please join me and thank our speakers for the presentations. So we have now a 5 minutes long break only, so I believe there's going to be a bell that will call us back. So please enjoy this 5 minutes and be back for another session. Thank you very much.